Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in November, and I'll also share with you the books that I plan on reading in December. So I've definitely gotten back into a kind of reading routine, and I've really kind of fallen in love with reading again. So I am almost like I'm a little bit behind on my Goodreads 50 books for read in the whole year. I think I have 4 more to go. So my goal is to kind of get that done with my TBR for December. So I'm hoping now that I have some good momentum going with some reading, I'll be able to keep it up. But overall in November, I read a total of 5 books. All of them, besides, I would say most of them actually are kind of murder mysteries. So they were, I find I read murder mysteries pretty quickly. So that was like my game plan, because I only have a few left on my shelf from like series that I haven't like finished the books that I currently own. So that has been kind of my game plan, is to kind of marathon the crime books and then start for December with the shorter books. You'll see kind of my method to my madness when I talk about my TBR books. But without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I read in November was actually a little bit of a disappointment, and it was Weyward by Emilia Hart. This is a book that has such a really fun premise, but I think the execution of it just left a lot to be desired. So this has kind of 3 main storylines that are kind of interwoven throughout kind of the past. We follow, I even forget their names. We follow Kate, who lives in present day, and she flees London to Weyward Cottage, which was left to her by her estranged aunt. We follow Violet in the 1940s during World War II, who lives a very kind of secluded life in this big house, but she really much kind of loves nature, and she is a little bit weird. And then we also follow, I think it's Altha, who is living in the 1600s, and she's being tried for witchcraft and murder. So I think the premise of this just sounded really interesting, but like I said, I think the execution of it left a lot to be desired. I think one of my main complaints here was that the kind of multiple storylines were very disjointed, and I think in a well-written book, kind of having multiple different kind of storylines throughout time can be done, if it's done well, can be done really well, and can be a really good kind of narrative tool also to show kind of parallels between past and present. But this one I just felt really disjointed, especially with some of the characters. I felt very disconnected to them. I think the only character that I felt like I had like a really like a connection with, or that I felt for, was Violet, and I think that's because we get to spend more time with her compared to some of the others, especially Altha. I think she gets very minimal page time compared to her other kind of characters that we're kind of dealing with. So yeah, like I said, this book was just left a lot to be desired. I think it did a really good job at kind of showcasing, you know, different types of, you know, our relationship to the world around us with animals and plants and like these type of things, and I think that was really well done. But I found it quite boring at times. The pacing was a little bit kind of iffy, so it left a lot to be desired. So this book is actually probably one of my biggest disappointments of the year. Next up, I ended up reading Movieland by Lee Goldberg. This is the newest installment in the Eve Ronan series, and I want to say this is either book 4, I want to say. I don't know exactly, but we follow Eve, and she is the youngest recruit into the LA homicide department because she was arresting she would kind of went viral for arresting a celebrity who was involved in a domestic violence dispute, and so she used that kind of positive kind of viral feedback from the community to kind of leverage a position into the homicide department. So she has a lot to prove. This book was really fun. So it takes place where there's kind of a string of murders taking place in around one of the state parks in LA, and basically there is this like serial sniper that's going about, and so Eve and her partner Duncan are kind of, you know, thrust into the investigation. And I will say I did really enjoy this. I thought it was really well written, it was really fun, and even though I was able to guess early on who the killer was in this, I still really enjoyed it. I loved kind of how action-packed it is. It is a little kind of like you have to do some suspension of disbelief, a belief in this one, just because of all the things that happened to Eve, and it's like, how is she still alive at this point? Where I feel like this happens in every single book, where she basically will fall off a cliff or someone shoots her, like these things. So I feel like she's using up her 9 lives, and she's kind of she doesn't think through her she just kind of acts without thinking, and so like I feel like that kind of does get a little bit annoying, and it's like playing out the same story every single time, because her thinking, like her not thinking and just kind of acting, always leads her into trouble, and it's kind of like the same kind of plot device every single time. But I still really enjoyed this, even though I was able to guess kind of early on. I think like I wasn't 100% sure, but I had a gut feeling it was this character, so I really enjoyed it. I think this is a really fun and unique series, and really action-packed. Like I feel like every chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so I just kind of want to keep reading. And I've read through like all these crime novels relatively quickly too. Next up, I ended up reading Devil's Way by Bryznda. This is the newest book in the Kate Marshall series, and this one was again another disappointment. We follow Kate, who is approached by this grandmother who's I want to say like 10 years ago that her grandson went missing when they went camping, and he was presumed to have died and fallen into the river and died, but his body was never found. So Kate is kind of tasked with trying to see if she can provide closure to the family. And what I think the series does really well is kind of use that cold case, as opposed to like Movieland or a lot of crime series. They're kind of in the moment active homicide investigations, whereas this one is a cold case, so a lot of either people have passed away, the evidence has been lost to time, those type of things. And I do enjoy that type of kind of investigation. But this one I just found really disappointing. I've been a really big fan of this series, but I think this one is the weakest so far. I think one of the compelling aspects of the series is Kate, the character herself, because she's very flawed, she's very complex, she has a lot of, demons that she's dealing with. But I felt like there was such a big disconnect between me and Kate in particular to this one. It was just I just felt very much at arm's length, and I felt like she was very flat compared to the three-dimensional character that I'm used to. And basically within 40 pages I figured it out. Like there was a very, very obvious clue. Like I think I should have highlighted it, because I was like, it was a very, very like blatantly obvious clue. And so because I figured it out, and because it was like I felt like I already figured it out very early on, and it was very obvious what happened, it was just not a lot of fun to read. I like guessed it immediately as soon as like this one character said something. I'm like, oh, I figured it out right here. So that was a little bit disappointing. So not my favorite in the series, but I'm hoping the next one can only go up from here. Continuing on with my crime series kick, I ended up picking up Fatal Witness, also by Bryznda. This is from his Erica Foster series, and I would say this is probably the newest Erica Foster series book in a while. I feel like he's been focusing on the Kate Marshall series, so it took me a while to be reacquainted with these characters, but it was easy to dive right in. And this one I will say I enjoyed so much more than Devil's Way. This one follows Erica, who's a homicide detective in London, and there is this case where this sister, goes to check on her, or this girl goes to check on her sister, and she is found murdered. And she, as we learn through the investigation, the sister was a kind of true crime podcaster, and it kind of goes off from there. This one, like I said, was so much better than Devil's Way. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really a lot of fun, and there were like quite a few plot twists in here that took me by surprise, and it was really just fun to read from, where I was like, oh my goodness, like I did not see that coming. This is what I'm used to from a Bryznda book. The Devil's Way was not very good at all. So I was very happy that after the disappointment of Devil's Way, this one was a lot of fun. Especially, even though I was kind of like, I was able to kind of figure it out, I still was really invested in to see if I was right, as opposed to like this one where I wasn't 100% sure, but I had a pretty good guess. Devil's Way, I knew without a doubt that I like figured it out. And the ending of this one was just really a lot of fun. It was super suspenseful and just a joy to read. So that's why I was like, he does have the ability to write really good like murder mystery thrillers, and this one was just a lot of fun. So it was really fun to kind of go back into this world and this character. I don't think I've read an Erica Foster book since maybe even before the pandemic, so it's been a while since there's been a new book in this series, but it was definitely a joy and a fun book to read. And last up, kind of rounding out the month, I ended up finishing If We Were Villains by M.L Rio. This is a book that I've heard really great things about, and I'm just very excited to finally check this one off on my TBR. It was recommended to me by my fiance. We call him my book taster because he can read 100-page or 800-page book in the span that it takes me to read like 200 pages. He's very fast reader, and this is one that I've heard really great things about. But it follows 7 students who are like Shakespearean actors in university, and this story is told 10 years after the events that took place. And so Oliver is just being released from prison for murder, and the homicide detective who was investigating this case never felt like Oliver was telling the truth. He felt like there was more to the story. So when he retires, he asks Oliver, after he gets out of jail, to kind of tell the honest truth. So this book is told over the span of a day, basically, of Oliver recounting the events leading up to the murder and ultimately kind of the fallout after that. It's very kind of similar in fashion to A Secret History by Donna Tartt, but instead of being told who is kind of murdered on the first page, this one you kind of have to figure out. And I was able to kind of guess who was murdered and who was responsible for the murder, but I still really enjoyed it. There was something really captivating about these characters, and kind of very similar to tropes that have been like kind of created by The Secret History. Like, there's a lot of pretentious characters, but I still was really invested in the plot. I think dark academia kind of like toggles the line between, you know, very pretentious characters, but you kind of still are invested in what happens to them in the plot. And this one was really good. It was very atmospheric. I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. I really enjoyed this, and so I'm happy that I finally was able to kind of check this one off on my TBR. It was really a lot of fun, and there were definitely parts where I was like kind of shocked or just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it was just kind of a joy to read and see these characters kind of go through this tremendous event and eventually see the kind of the fallout kind of take place over the weeks after the murder, which I thought was really well done. It was really a joy to read. I will say, like, obviously because they're Shakespearean like actors or like Shakespearean actor students, like, it was, as someone who doesn't like Shakespeare, there's a lot of Shakespeare just kind of quoted, and they will quote it to each other, which was like, I think adds to their pretentiousness. But like, as someone who never liked Shakespeare and or understood Shakespeare, I really like skipped a lot of like the direct like dialogues. You can see like there's literally like direct quotes, and so I would like skip those parts where they're like quoting Shakespeare to each other or recounting like scenes. I think that was my only thing. Just as a personal note, I don't like Shakespeare's, but I still really enjoyed this. I gave it it was a solid 4 out of 5 stars and just a really fun dark academia read. Alright, and so finally moving on to the books that I plan on reading in December. As I said, I have 4 books that I need to kind of read in order to hit my 50 books read per year kind of goal. So I have like some shorter books here. I have 6 books total, so we'll see if I end up reading all 6. I have no idea. But there's some like shorter books on here that I think I was just like, they'll be quicker to get through, just to kind of get through my, you know, goal. And they're kind of all over in terms of genre too. I was just looking and like these ones kind of piqued my interest. So without further ado, let's go kind of dive into the December TBR. First up, this is carryover from my November TBR that I didn't end up reading, and it is One Dark Window by Rachiel Gillig. And I believe this is like this is like a fantasy romance, but it says Elspeth Spindle needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie mist-locked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls in the nightmare, an ancient, merciful spirit trapped in her head. He protects her. He keeps her secret, but nothing comes but nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into a world of shadow and deception, she joins a dangerous quest to cure Blunder of the dark magic infecting it. Except the highwayman just so happens to be the king's own nephew, captain of the most dangerous men in Blunder and guilty of high treason. I think this is also a series too. It says, I believe it is book 1 of the Shepherd Kings, so definitely if I do enjoy this, it's definitely a series I can check out more of, but also the font on this one's pretty big, so I think this one would be pretty easy to get through as well. So we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to get to this one in December. Next up, I have Trapper Road by Rachiel, Caine, and Carrie Ryan. This is the newest installment in the Still Hills Lake series, and Rachiel Caine, the original author, passed away, and I think this was like she had partial notes for this book kind of already planned out, and so I believe Carrie Ryan went in and kind of wrote the rest of the book. I don't know if there's any more books in this series, but this is the last like crime novel series book on my shelf that I have not read yet, so I was like, I'm gonna usually read through these fairly quickly, but with crime novels I don't really like to know too much about it. But the first book, we follow Gwen, who is kind of on the run from a lot of people. We get introduced to her, and she and her siblings. She and her children are under false names, and they're kind of living a very secluded life when they move to Stillhouse Lake, and they kind of have a dark secret where they Gwen was married to a notorious serial murderer, and so a lot of people believe even though she was acquitted, she was proven innocent for kind of those crimes. A lot of people still think she was involved somehow, and so a lot of people are after her, and it kind of goes off from there. This, I believe, is after she becomes like a private investigator, and it kind of goes from there. But with like crime novels, I don't like to know too much about them. I like to dive right in. So yeah, I am excited to like I said, I don't know if this is the last one in the series, but I'm excited to get introduced to these characters again. These next two are books that are on the shorter end, so I think I'll be reading these ones first, and they've also been on my TBR for a while, so it'll be nice to be able to check them off. I first have The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is an author that I've never read from, but I definitely want to read more of her works. I know she's a very beloved author, and I think she's, you know, a crafter of some of America's greatest works, so I'm really excited. But I think her books have just been, you know, really classified as moving and, you know, making really good, you know, meaning behind them. This one says, Piccola, a young black girl, prays every day for beauty. Mocked by other children for the dark skin, curly hair, and brown eyes that set her apart, she yearns for the blonde hair and blue eyes that she believes will allow her to finally fit in. Yet as her dream grows more fervent, her life slowly begins to disintegrate in the face of adversity and strife. A brilliant examination of our obsession with beauty and conformity, Toni Morrison's first novel asks powerful questions about race, class, and gender, with the subtlety and grace that have always characterized her writing. So I'm really just excited to dive into this. Like I said, I feel like Toni Morrison is probably one of our like modern day like greatest writers. So and I also believe this is like part of like a series or companion novel. So I feel like this is probably like a book that everyone needs to read, and also it's fairly short as well. So I was like, it's perfect. It has dual purpose. Another short book that I have on my shelf is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is one that I've heard really great things about, and I believe it's kind of about the plague. It says England 1580, the Black Death creeps across the land, an ominous threat infecting the healthy, the sick, the old, and the young alike. The end of days is near, but life always goes on. A young Latin tutor, penniless and bullied by a violent father, falls in love with an extraordinary, eccentric young woman. Agnes is a wild creature who walks her family's land with a falcon on her glove, and is known throughout the countryside for her unusual gifts as a healer, understanding plants and potions better than she does people. Once she settles with her husband on Henley Street in Stratford-upon-Avon, she becomes a fiercely protective mother and a steadfast centrifugal force in the life of her young husband, whose career on the London stage is just taking off when his beloved young son succumbs to sudden fever. I think this is like loosely based off of Shakespeare, or like ties into Shakespeare. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Shakespearean fan, so this one did seem really interesting. So and again, I've heard great things about this book as well, and also it's one of my short books, so hopefully I can get through this one quickly as well. This is a book that just sounds really intriguing, and I think it's just a topic that is very important to read. Not only like was the Bluest Eyes kind of tied in with like meanings, a commentary on like race and external beauty and like all these things, this one I think deals with a completely different topic, but nonetheless is still very important, and it's about having good access to abortion care. And this book, I only was able to find it in Toronto when we were there. It was hard to find around here, so I'm happy I got my hands on it. But it is Looking for Jane by Heather Marshall, and this is kind of 3 storylines we're following through. So it says 2017, when Angela discovers a mysterious letter containing a life-shattering confession, she sets out to find the intended recipient. Her search takes her back to the 1970s, when a group of daring women operated an illegal underground abortion network in Toronto known only by its whispered codename Jane. 1971. As a teenager, Dr. Evelyn Taylor was sent to a home for fallen women when she was forced to give up her baby for adoption, a trauma from which she has never recovered. Despite harrowing police raids and the constant threat of arrest, she joins the Jane Network as an abortion provider, determined to give other women the choice she never had. And then finally, 1980. After discovering a shocking secret about her family history, 20-year-old Nancy begins to question everything she has known. When she unexpectedly becomes pregnant, she feels like she has no one to turn to for help. Grappling with her decision, she locates Jane and finds a place of her own alongside Dr. Taylor, but she can never escape the lies that haunt her. I think this just sounds really interesting. I think especially in modern day, I think, you know, the conversation of abortion and letting women have choices over their own body, I think is very important, an important discussion to have. So I've never really read like a historical fiction that deals with this topic, so this one did intrigue me, and being from Toronto, I thought, you know, I don't think I've ever read a book that takes place in Toronto, so I'm excited to pick this one up. And lastly, I don't think I'm gonna get to all 6, but it's wishful thinking. I just need to get to at least 4. But this is one that's been on my shelf for a while that I am just excited to dive into, and it is The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. And again, I think this is another one that has dual storylines. So it says, 1629, a newly orphan girl named Macon is bound for the Dutch East Indies on the Batavia, one of the greatest ships of the Dutch Golden Age. Curious and mischievous, Macon spends the long journey going on misadventures above and below the deck, searching for a mythical monster, but the true monster might be closer than she thinks. And then it goes, 1989. A lowly boy named Gil, who, after the death of his mother, is sent to live with his grandfather, a fisherman off the coast of Western Australia, among the members of the seasonal fishing community where his late mother once lived. There, on the tiny reef shroud island, he discovers a story of an infamous shipwreck. And the tagline is, one shipwreck, 2 misfits, 3 centuries apart. Again, this is one that sounds intriguing, and I feel like especially going into 2024, one of my goals is to kind of read a little bit more historical fiction. I used to read a lot of historical fiction, and then as I joined BookTube, I've kind of fallen out of reading historical fiction as much as I used to, so I feel like I have a good handful of books here to kind of help kind of kickstart this and refire my love for historical fiction. So I'm excited to hopefully pick this one up by the end of the year. That's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books you read in November were and what books are on your December TBR. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.